In the heart of a thunderstorm, two worlds collide, one sheltered by wealth, the other forgotten by society. Amelia Stone, a glamorous heiress with the world at her feet, finds herself stranded in a derelict part of the city when a violent storm halts her escape from another hollow social event. Shivering and alone, she's offered unexpected shelter by Daniel, a quiet, kind, homeless man who shields her from the rain with nothing but a worn tarp and gentle words. What begins as a fleeting moment of compassion unravels everything Amelia thought she knew about life, love, and worth. Haunted by Daniel's dignity and his mysterious past, she searches for him in a city that's trained her to look away. What she finds is more than a man. It's a broken genius with a story that shatters her privileged bubble. As storms continue to rage, outside and within, Amelia must choose between the safety of her high-rise life or a leap into the unknown. When she finally returns to that alley, it's not just to thank him. It's to offer him a chance to rebuild both their lives. This isn't a love story born of romance. It's one born in the rain, forged in dignity, and sealed with purpose. The first raindrop landed like a warning. Amelia Stone glanced up from her phone just as the sky cracked open. Thunder rumbled deep like something growling beneath the pavement. In a flash, the city transformed. Bright neon signs turned blurry in the downpour, and the warm golden light of uptown restaurants faded behind streaked glass. Her driver had vanished hours ago, and now her car, a sleek imported coupe more style than substance, sat useless on a deserted side street in the warehouse district, its engine completely dead. "This can't be happening," she muttered, slamming her palm against the steering wheel. She was dressed for an art gala, silk heels, a designer dress that clung to her like wet paper, and a clutch too small to hold anything useful. Her phone blinked. 3% battery, no signal. Wind howled between the crumbling buildings, sending trash whirling into chaotic dances. The street was deserted except for a flickering street lamp and a hunched figure curled against a wall at the edge of an alley. She hesitated. Rich girls didn't talk to strangers in alleys, especially not ones bundled in old coats and wrapped in rags. But tonight wasn't following any of society's rules. Lightning lit the sky. The downpour thickened, now a curtain of silver knives. "Hey!" she called out, half shouting above the wind. The figure didn't move. Amelia stepped out of the car, immediately soaked. Her heels splashed in dirty puddles. Her teeth began to chatter, and for the first time in years, she felt fear creep up her spine, not the fear of missing a meeting or being photographed in a bad angle, but primal, real fear. As she reached the alley's edge, the figure lifted his head. He looked about 40, though the wear on his face made it hard to tell. Scruffy beard, eyes too intelligent to belong to someone society had thrown away. He studied her not with suspicion, but curiosity. "You're gonna freeze to death out here," he said, voice low and calm. "I'm fine," she snapped automatically. Then after a beat, "My car's dead. There's no signal, no one's around." He blinked. "Yeah, this part of the city doesn't care much for the rich." She flushed. "I didn't plan to be here." "Nobody plans to end up in a storm." Then silently, he shifted aside and lifted a battered plastic tarp, creating space next to him under the narrow cover between two buildings. She hesitated. "I don't bite," he added with a faint smirk. "Just figured you'd rather be dry." Amelia stepped forward. The tarp rustled as she ducked underneath. The wind still reached them, but it was better barely. He'd managed to build a tiny fire in an old metal can, burning what looked like cardboard and scrap wood. It hissed in the rain, but still flickered. "You don't have to talk," he said, leaning back against the wall. "Just sit and wait the worst out. Storms pass." She sat, pulling her knees up, unsure whether to be grateful or terrified. Her expensive dress clung to her like seaweed. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the storm's rage. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded, still staring at the fire. "I'm Amelia," she offered. "Daniel." More silence, something about the way he sat. Spine straight, hands folded, felt off. Not like other homeless people she'd seen in the city. He didn't reek of alcohol or mumble to himself. He had a calmness, a stillness that unsettled her, like someone who had once been in control of the world and then watched it slip away. "You live here?" He gave a small laugh. "I survive here, not quite the same." She shifted, looking at him sideways. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. The fire popped. "Wrong turn, that's all." Another silence. This one is heavier. When the rain eased an hour later, Amelia stood. The wind had died down, but the city was still shivering, like it had seen something it couldn't forget. She reached into her clutch, pulling out $100 bill. Daniel didn't move. "Take it," she said. He shook his head. "You needed shelter. I gave it. That's not something I charge for." She hesitated, staring at him. No one said no to money, not in her world. "I'll be fine," he said softly. "You take care of yourself, Amelia." She nodded slowly, unsure what had just happened. Then she walked back to her car, her heels squelching, her soul unsettled in a way that no amount of money could soothe. Amelia couldn't sleep that night. Wrapped in her cashmere robe, she sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, staring down at the glistening city. Cars moved like blood through arteries. Lights blinked on tall buildings, but all she saw was the alley, the tarp, the fire, and the man named Daniel. Why hadn't he taken the money? Why had his refusal felt heavier than the storm? She'd met thousands of people in her world. Investors, celebrities, influencers. None had made her feel like Daniel did in those brief, soaking hours. It wasn't attraction, at least not the kind she understood. It was the discomfort of being seen, of sitting next to someone who had no reason to lie to her and didn't care who she was. She didn't tell anyone about it the next day, not her assistant, not her fiancé, Charles, who noticed she was quiet and chalked it up to the weather. But by midweek, the discomfort grew. She found herself checking her phone during meetings, her mind drifting. She even Googled homeless shelters in Midtown, unsure what she was hoping to find. Daniel hadn't looked like he belonged out there. That was the part that kept gnawing at her. And finally, on Thursday afternoon, she drove back. The alley looked smaller in the sunlight. Amelia stepped cautiously out of her SUV, dressed this time in jeans and a sweatshirt, no makeup. She felt exposed, like she was walking into a memory that might reject her. The plastic tarp was gone. She moved slowly down the alley, eyes scanning for any sign of Daniel. Trash bins, broken pallets, graffiti, everything was the same, except for him. "Looking for someone?" a voice called. She turned. A woman in a neon vest leaned against a nearby chain-link fence, sipping from a thermos. I met someone here the night of the storm. A man. I think his name was Daniel." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Tall guy, bit of a beard, wears an old army coat." Amelia nodded. "Yeah, Daniel's around sometimes. Doesn't stay in one spot long. Smart man, doesn't talk much." "Do you know where he went?" The woman shook her head. "No one knows where anyone goes, sweetheart. This isn't the Ritz. People disappear." Sometimes they come back. She hesitated, then reached into her bag. He gave me shelter that night. I wanted to thank him. The woman considered her, then fished into her pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. He left this, said if anyone came asking, to give it to them. Amelia unfolded it. It was a rough charcoal sketch, her face turned upward toward invisible rain, and beneath it, in careful handwriting, "Some storms bring clarity." Her breath caught. Charles was furious. "You drove downtown to look for a homeless man?" he shouted. "Are you completely out of your mind?" Amelia stood by the window, arms folded. "He helped me. That night I got stuck in the storm. He gave me shelter. I was cold, scared, and he didn't ask for anything in return." That's what these people do. They bait you with pity and bleed you dry. Her head snapped toward him. "He didn't even take money." "That's even worse," Charles said. "Now you feel guilty. It's manipulation, textbook." Amelia felt something in her fracture. Charles had always been controlling, but now the grip felt suffocating. She turned away, disgusted by the silk tie around his neck, the way his watch glinted like a leash. "You don't know him," she said softly. "You don't know what he's been through." "And you do?" "No," she admitted, "but I want to." The silence between them stretched. Finally, Charles exhaled sharply. "You want to throw away your reputation for a man who sleeps in alleys?" She didn't answer, not because she agreed, but because for the first time she wasn't sure her reputation mattered anymore. Later that night, alone in her room, Amelia took the sketch Daniel had drawn and pinned it to her mirror. She stared at it for a long time. The woman in the drawing didn't look glamorous. She looked real, and perhaps for the first time so did Amelia. The gala was a blur of crystal flutes and hollow laughter. Amelia moved through it like a ghost in a gold dress. Her eyes caught chandeliers, smiled at donors, and nodded at Charles's clients, but inside, something churned. It was like watching her own life from behind glass. "Amelia, darling, you're glowing," purred Lila Montrose, a PR queen with a surgically perfected smile. "New skincare," Amelia replied automatically. Charles watched her closely all evening. He kept one hand on her back, possessive as though marking territory, and leaned in too often with whispers she barely heard. By midnight she excused herself and stepped onto the balcony. The city buzzed below, but her thoughts drifted back to that alley, that fire in a can, that sketch. She pulled out her phone and opened a notes app. Find Daniel. The idea was no longer a passing thought. It was an ache, a calling. There was something about him, his silence, his steadiness, that had cracked the veneer of her world. Charles joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You've been different lately," he murmured. She didn't answer. "Just remember who you are," he said quietly. "You're not some bleeding heart. You're Amelia Stone." But that was exactly the problem. She didn't want to be Amelia Stone anymore. 2 days later, Amelia returned to the alley, and the next day, and the next. Each time she wore plainer clothes and drove herself. The woman in the neon vest never reappeared. Neither did Daniel. On the 4th day, she visited the Midtown shelter. Inside, volunteers bustled and voices echoed off cinder block walls. She asked for Daniel, but no one knew him by name. A younger man with a clipboard shrugged. "Could try St. Mary's on 43rd or down by the train tracks. Some of the regulars float through both." She followed each lead: train yards, soup lines, park benches, and then, finally, at a makeshift encampment behind a gutted supermarket, she saw him. Daniel was sitting on a crate, sketching in a worn notebook. His hands were still, elegant, purposeful. Daniel. He looked up slowly. No surprise, no alarm, just recognition, as if he'd known she'd come. "You again," he said, closing the book. "I've been looking for you." "You shouldn't have." "I had to." He studied her, the silence between them thick. "I don't belong in your world," he said finally, "and you don't belong in mine. Then maybe both our worlds are broken." That made him pause, a flicker in his eyes. She stepped forward. "I didn't come for charity. I came for the truth." They walked together along the edge of the encampment, past tents made of tarps and dreams. Amelia offered no judgment. Daniel offered no apologies. He took her to a nearby bench, away from the others. "You want to know why I'm here?" he said, not as a question. She nodded. "I was an architect," he began. "Firms, contracts, awards. I built spaces that won praise for their light and shape. I believed buildings could heal people." He paused. "Then a drunk driver ran a red light. My wife, my daughter, gone." Amelia's heart clenched. "I kept working, at first, but everything I built felt like a lie. Eventually, I let it all collapse." "And no one helped?" "A few tried, but grief isn't a problem people like to solve. It's messy. Doesn't look good in a brochure." She looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shrugged. "It's not about pity. It's about purpose. I lost mine. That's when you really fall, when the world forgets what you're for." She pulled something from her bag, the sketch he'd drawn of her. "I found this." He smiled faintly. "Some storms bring clarity." She met his gaze. "And some people bring shelter." A long silence. Then he said softly, "Maybe we're both trying to rebuild." Amelia returned to her penthouse that evening, but the world she'd known no longer felt like home. She poured herself a glass of wine and pulled open her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she finally typed, "Daniel Shaw, Architect, New York." The search returned articles buried years ago. Photos of a man in a crisp suit smiling beside blueprints. Features a promising architect with a modern, human-centered design philosophy. Then the crash, the obituary, a wrongful death lawsuit settled out of court. And after that, nothing. She leaned back, overwhelmed. Daniel had once stood among the best, and then he fell, hard and alone. She stared at his picture for a long time, same eyes, same quiet intensity. But in those old photos, they were lit from within. The man she met had the same fire, but buried under soot and silence. The next day, she met with her father's foundation director. "I want to launch a housing initiative," she said, placing sketches and plans on the table. "Not just shelters, places with dignity, light, space, hope." He raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious. What sparked this?" Amelia just smiled. "A man I met in the rain." Amelia began volunteering at the Midtown shelter once a week. It wasn't a headline move. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. She swept floors, served soup, and folded clothes. Slowly the staff warmed to her. So did some of the regulars. She wasn't the heiress there, just Amelia. She told Daniel about it on their walks. He rarely came inside the shelter, preferring the edge of things. But he listened. Always listened. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked one afternoon. "Because I think maybe the world needs fewer towers and more safe places at ground level." Daniel gave a soft laugh. "You sound like an architect." "You still are one," she replied. He looked at her then, eyes guarded. "That life is gone. Then help me build something new." Daniel said nothing for a long moment. Then, almost reluctantly, he nodded. Together they began sketching ideas on napkins and notebooks, modular layouts, sustainable materials, community courtyards. Daniel's hands came alive again, sweeping graceful lines across the page. Amelia watched him quietly, realizing she wasn't just saving him. He was saving her too. But across town, Charles was watching, and he wasn't about to let her slip away so easily. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Amelia returned to her apartment one evening to find Charles waiting in the lobby. He stood tall, polished, and dangerous in his calm. "You've been very busy," he said. She walked past him. "Not now, Charles." He followed. "Not ever, if you keep this up. People are talking. Your name's attached to shelters now, vagrants, sketchy neighborhoods. They're people, Charles. People with stories." "And what's his story?" he snapped. "The homeless man you keep meeting in alleys." She froze, then turned to face him. "His name is Daniel. He's a better man than most people I know, including you. He's a disaster waiting to happen. What, are you going to fix him?" "No, I'm going to listen to him, something no one's done in years." Charles's face hardened. "If you keep this up, you'll destroy everything your family built." Amelia stepped closer. "Maybe what they built wasn't strong enough. Maybe I want to build something else." She left him standing there. That night she found Daniel back in the alley, sketchbook open, fire lit again. She sat beside him without a word. After a long moment he handed her a sketch, a building with soft curves and open arms, a place that welcomed. She smiled. "Let's build this." The first time Daniel walked into the Stone Foundation's office, heads turned. He was clean-shaven, wearing an old suit Amelia had helped him find. A little worn, but tailored well enough to carry his quiet dignity. He didn't speak much at the design table. He didn't have to. The moment his pencil touched paper, the room leaned in. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Amelia worked side by side. They transformed napkin sketches into blueprints, ideas into renderings. The project became more than housing. It became a symbol, a structure born from brokenness that could still stand strong. They named it the Haven Project. It wasn't long before whispers reached the board. An unqualified outsider was spearheading the design. A few members even hinted that Amelia was romantically involved with the architect. Something that wasn't entirely untrue, though neither of them had put it into words yet. At night, they walked the city. They talked about everything and nothing, about how the stars looked different when you had a roof, and how silence could mean comfort, not just absence. One evening, under a quiet overpass, Amelia finally asked, "What if we stop walking in two worlds?" Daniel paused. "And walk in one?" She nodded. "I'm not sure I know how," he said. "Then let's learn together." Construction began on a donated lot in the East District, a place once marked by decay. Now it echoed with the sound of rebirth, hammers, laughter, shouting crews, and the low hum of hope. Daniel directed the team with quiet precision, often climbing scaffolding to adjust something himself. He became a mystery to the workers, this soft-spoken man who drew better than any of them and took breaks sitting on concrete blocks watching the sun rise. Amelia was always nearby, boots muddy, notebook in hand, hair pulled back. Her phone barely left her bag anymore. When a local news station ran a story about the project, they called her the heiress with a hammer. But Daniel was only mentioned briefly, a formerly homeless man helping with design. It didn't bother him. He didn't want credit, but it bothered Amelia. "He's the architect," she told the reporter during a follow-up interview, "not just of the building, but of this idea." That night, she found Daniel back at the site after hours, sketching in the light of a hanging bulb. "I want people to know who you are," she said softly. Daniel looked up. "They'll see the building. That's enough." She reached out and took his hand. "Not for me." The headlines hit the next morning. "Heiress falls for homeless architect, fairy tale or PR stunt." Daniel Shaw, architect or opportunist? "Storm of romance rocks the stone foundation." Amelia's face was splashed across tabloids. Her relationship with Daniel twisted into something scandalous. Charles had leaked everything, photos, names, and even exaggerated quotes from board members. The backlash was swift. Donors threatened to pull funding. Her father's voice over the phone was cold. "You're dismantling our reputation for a man who doesn't belong in your world." Daniel disappeared for 2 days. When she finally found him, back at the shelter, handing out food, his eyes were distant. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I didn't want to become your scandal." "You're not," she said firmly. "You're my choice." He shook his head. "You're under siege because of me." "No," she said, "because of the truth, and truth always threatens lies." But Daniel had spent too long in the shadows, too long convincing himself he wasn't worth the light. "I need time," he whispered. Amelia nodded, though it felt like something inside her was splintering. She walked out into the rain, alone this time, no tarp, no shelter. But as she stood there, she whispered to herself, "He came for me once. Now it's my turn." Here are the final 2 chapters of Shelter in the Storm, bringing the story to its emotional conclusion. The rain came just as suddenly as before, sharp, loud, and without apology. Amelia stood at the edge of the alley where it had all begun. The same bricks, same rusted fire escape, same scent of wet concrete. She was soaked within seconds, her coat plastered to her skin, her heels planted like anchors in the pavement. She waited, and then, like a ghost pulled from memory, he stepped out of the shadows. Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't have to. She turned toward him, eyes brimming. "I told you once, I don't want a story that ends in a storm. I want one that begins there." He stayed still, rain sliding down his face, his clothes already drenched. "I don't care what the tabloids say. I don't care what my family thinks. I care about you, about what we've built, about what we can build." Daniel's voice was quiet. "And what if I fall again? Then we fall together." A long silence passed between them, full of everything unsaid and everything understood. Then Amelia reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded blueprint. It was a design, a building with arches like open arms. Daniel's sketch, but modified. Amelia had added something, a rooftop garden, space for 2. She looked up. "Will you build it with me?" His answer wasn't in words. He just stepped forward, and for the second time, they stood beneath the storm. Only this time, she was the one offering shelter. 6 months later, the ribbon was cut. The Haven Project stood tall on the East District skyline, not the highest building, but certainly the brightest. Its windows reflected light with intention. Its doors opened with warmth. Daniel stood beside Amelia in a simple suit, blueprints rolled under one arm, the applause of the crowd echoing behind him. The ceremony was modest, no red carpets. Just the people who mattered, volunteers, neighbors, architects, and a few former skeptics who now carried quiet respect. A plaque by the door read, "The Haven Project, designed by Daniel Shaw and Amelia Stone, for those rebuilding one breath at a time." Inside, sunlight spilled through wide atrium windows onto furniture made of reclaimed wood. Children played in a reading nook. A woman painted by the window. A man tuned a donated guitar. It wasn't just a shelter, it was the beginning. Later, on the rooftop garden, Amelia and Daniel sat side by side, the city stretching out before them.
"I never thought I'd find home again," he said softly.
She smiled. You didn't find it. You built it. He turned to her. And you? She took his hand. I stopped living in someone else's tower and started planting seeds. The wind shifted. The storm had passed. And in its place, something beautiful had taken root.